we're going to be potentially live to people. I didn't really prep the like I said, 'cause so this is my fault. I thought we were tomorrow, so it's
Oh,
all good. So when you hit me, it's like no problem. Like I was ready for it because I was doing some stuff anyway later on tonight. So,
I can do it tomorrow.
no, it's all good. We're here. We're already here. We might as well just
All right.
go.
All right.
You know, we're here, so it's all good. It's all good. You
And
ready?
you then put it up and other people can access it later, right?
Yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much how this works. I do it all different formats. So
Good.
yeah. So we are officially live, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode 998. I have finally gotten honestly kind of a legend. And like no, I know it sounds like I know it's got to be surreal in some senses because you've accomplished an incredible amount in not only this industry but in other things you've done, right? It's weird kind of looking back and seeing yourself and going, "Holy shit, I did this." Is
Yeah.
that
Oh, indeed, indeed. Yes, it's true.
yeah. Congrats on your you got some like it just shortly happened after When Words Collide. You got film rights for one of your books, right?
The latest book, yeah, someday
Yeah.
I'll find you. Yes, it's
Yeah.
I mean, you might have seen my slightly sort of well, okay, post because I have been optioned many times and nothing has been made. And so I always say many are optioned and few are made. However, I do allow myself a moment of woohoo, because you never know. And this particular person has been a player in Hollywood, is still presumably a player in Hollywood. She won an Oscar once for editing, so she knows some people. So we'll see. I don't actually reckon I'm going to ever accept that a movie or a TV series has been made from one of my works until I'm sitting with a paying audience seeing my name on the credits.
That's actually fair. Hollywood is a strange business. I actually had this conversation. I was in San Diego with Sylvain Nouvel, and he's got like this stuff options, and it's a strange business. Sometimes they pay you not to make the movie.
Well, this is also
It
the way.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just the way it goes, right? It's a bit weird. I mean, you're getting paid for it, which is nice at least, right? I
Mm,
mean,
not much these days, to be
yeah,
honest. Most
yeah,
most things are done on very skimpy, and they take it for no conditions, and it's called a shopping option. No conditions, very no money changes hands, and they have the right to shop it and see if they can get something in a very short amount of time. And if they do get some major interest, then they have to come back and negotiate the whole contract. Up to now, it's just a letter, a shopping option.
oh, geez. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's gotten
So
it's it's gotten stranger since even I last heard about it.
oh yeah, I mean, I've been optioned in the past and made a bit of money from it for sure. But these days, it depends. I think if I was a Pulitzer Prize winner, that might be different. But I'm
Yeah,
not. So.
yeah. I actually feel pretty good today because remember the AI thing at When Words Collide.
Yes,
One of my things came true today.
which is
The legalization of I told you that there would be some legal coming down. So
absolutely.
right, and one of the things I said was that one of the arguments was that AI would be considered public domain. It is right now, as it stands, public domain
Oh, and how is that going to help me as an author?
because that means anyone that generates AI art can now be pirated without any compromise or penalty. So that means what that means is anyone that wants to generate makes anything generated with AI really can't make money with it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that happened today. So the
Oh,
court ruling happened. So
ah,
now, don't get me wrong. There's going to be still some more recalibrations before it's all said and done.
sure.
But yeah, I mean that was pretty much one angle. It's like I said it back then. From a legal standpoint, right? There's some hurdles that has to be cleared with AI, and
Ah,
this is the first. And this is the first one. So
interesting. Okay, well, good. I'll take that as a win for the team.
yeah, no, it is. It also affects the Hollywood writers' strike big time too because it gives the writers and actors a lot more leverage now.
Good,
Yeah,
good.
because now the Secret Invasion opening credits at Marvel is now piratable. That's that's
Oh,
that's, that's hilarious, isn't it?
oh, that is actually yes.
Yeah,
They're gonna have to rethink, aren't they? Yeah.
that's the whole thing, right? Like it's an IP business. Like just the business we're in is IP, and
Mhm.
if you can't monetize it, no one would be here, right? That's just the way it is, and Yeah, so like again, and so the idea of using AI as a shortcut is now gone. So at least for now. Like again, it's going to change the game, obviously. We've talked about it
Yeah.
privately,
Sure.
but it's not going to drive everybody onto the assembly line.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good to hear. This is
good to
good.
hear.
Yeah.
How are you today, man? How's things?
Things are exceptionally good. You've caught me at a very fine moment, though poised on the finest moment, which is I'm just about to write the end on the first draft of my latest novel, and I will literally, as soon as you and I come off this, I will write the last 2 pages of it. I left it at the point where I'd sort of, because I'm not a very good typist, I was typing it in there. I thought, and I had to get somewhere, so I just stopped and I picked up my Waterman fountain pen, and I picked up my notebook, and I wrote effectively the last page of the book longhand in my execrable handwriting. And so you and I finish this, and I'm going to go back in and put it in, and that's going to be the first draft done. So
I like actually writing novels in longhand. I actually find it's a fantastic way of doing them.
I wrote one novel longhand because I thought it was such a difficult novel to write. I knew it was going to be. It was my novel Vlad: The Last Confession, and I wrote it longhand. But then, as I say, my writing is execrable. So when I went to put it into the computer, I'm going, "What is that word?" And so I've since stopped doing that. But I do. I mean, I have these notebooks. All writers
Yeah.
fetishistic, and I have these notebooks. These are Clairefontaine from France, and I every book I write usually has one at least of these filled with handwriting, because I dive what I call off piece. I come off the screen and write stuff and make notes and draw little maps sometimes, and
So you use the notepad to world build then.
Yes, I suppose I do. Yeah, I mean, world building is such an interesting word. I mean, because historical fiction, I do it, fantasy, I do it, both of which I write. But yeah, it's not so much. It's more to get the details of stuff. I mean, yeah, some world building. Like I had to launch an attack on a fortified. This is 1778.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had to launch an attack on this fortified sort of manor house, and I thought, how am I going to do that? So I did that. The map there. There's the
That's
house,
awesome.
cornfield. There's that. I'm a terrible drawer, as you can see. But
Actually, you're not that terrible. You got clean lines. You actually have clean lines. You'd actually,
I suppose
yeah.
it's all right. But anyway, and that was narrowing it down
Yeah.
to a particular spot in New Jersey that was accessible from my characters. So that's world building, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, it's a little bit like here. I think the thing is something that I've understood. Like it took me a long time to figure this out with novels in particular. You have to have more story than what's on the page. You need to, because you need to understand the place you're in, and then the really hard part is, okay, what's the story I'm actually telling here? And
Absolutely.
sometimes we don't always know the forest from the trees, and that on that one, I feel the better the emotional connection you have to the story, the more important that part of the story is.
Oh,
But that's my working theory right
yeah,
now.
yeah. No, I think it's absolutely true. I mean, you can emotionally connect to things. You're gonna write in a better way. I mean, sometimes, of course, it depends on the context of the scene. But usually there's some emotion involved. Sometimes, like I do, I as they say in the trade, I give good battle. And sometimes, I can just, like, I wrote that attack the other day. Now my normal daily output is on a first draft, it varies between 2,500 words. The battle day, I wrote 3,777 words, because I was like, oh, he shouldn't do this.
That's excellent. Yeah.
Those blokes attacking him with a pistol and that sort of stuff. So yeah, so it was fun. But I'm very excited to finish this book. So
Yeah. Well, first off, I guess congratulations. Um, what number of book is this for you? This is the one you're working on right now.
23.
Oh, geez. Does it get easier, or is it always crazy?
No, I think it does get easier. What doesn't get easier is starting. There's always, and this one I had a bit of a delay between, my new novel Someday I'll Find You, which is out and doing very well, thank you very much, still riding high in Canada at least. But I took a bit of time off between that one and this one. Normally I'm a book a year guy, and I actually took sort of almost 8 months while I saw what was happening with the new book. And then I just thought, no, I just have to start writing again, and I dived into this one. So it's been great fun. So
Nice.
starting sometimes is, I've got to dive in. It's like, you want to go swimming. It's a bit nippy in the air, but you want to get in the water. It's going to be a bit cold when you dive in, but once you dive in, you start swimming, you think, oh, of course, this is what I love to do.
That was actually, so I was in San Diego a couple weeks before When Worlds Collide. That was the weird thing about the Pacific Ocean. I did not expect it to be as cold as it was. Right, the first time.
You should try that where I am on Salt Spring Island. The Pacific Ocean here is a lot colder than San Diego.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. We're in Canada. It's always it's always a little cooler up here, but even there, it's like why are you wearing a wetsuit? And I go in there. Oh, I understand now why you wear a wetsuit. Okay, I get it. So, but no, it's but again, I think when we start the story, it's the other thing is, I know for me the hard part with starting one is, am I coming at it from the right place?
Yeah.
Right? I think that's the hard part for me, because the first draft I'll be like it's usually the beginning is they tell you not to rewrite. I'll like secret. Sometimes the first 2 or 3 chapters I will rewrite those the hardest, because it's like, am I coming at it at the right place?
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm not. I can just feel it. Sometimes when you get started, it's like, no, this isn't right. I don't have the right path to what I want to do here. Yeah. And I do it again, and then I'll do it again. Now, once I'm really into it, I don't revise until it's done.
Yeah, but that's my system as well, really. I've only ever once gone back and completely rewritten an opening, and that was on an editor's advice for my novel Fire.
Yeah.
Plague Fire duology, and I had it starting, I thought, quite cleverly with a minor character, and she said, major characters, the sequel straight away, first scene, first page. I went, she's right, damn it.
Yeah, isn't it suck when they write, when they're absolutely, they say, hey, I'm going to argue with you, and then they just like this, like, no,
yeah, they're inevitably right. I almost, well, most of the time. So I just mostly, there's just, an occasion when you go, no. And then they're fine, because they're like, well, your book, man, so.
Well, no, they're, again, it's their job. Their job is to do the best book possible, but they're coming at it from a less biased position than we are. Because we genuinely care about it. They do too, but it's our child. Yeah. It's their cousin. Yeah. It's right. Yeah.
That's a good analogy. But I think the key for me, what I learned early on, fortunately, with working with editors very early on, because I've always had, every single book of mine has had a great editor, and some are just magnificent and some are just good, but when I realized, as I say, very early on in my career, that the editor is not about writing their book for you. They're about helping you clarify your vision. And it's all about clarity. I don't understand this, Chris, and you go, oh, well, because that's this. And they go, well, I didn't see that. And I go, oh, yeah, you're right, because I didn't put it in chapter 3. So that when they help you do that, that's the great thing about, for me anyway, about an editor.
Yeah, no, for me, it's the only time they will, and it's usually just a rework of their suggestion at that point. They're like, do this. And then I go, but if I do that, this happens. I'm not sure we can do it that way. And then they're like, oh yeah, no, you're right. Okay, how about this? And it's usually at that point they're working with you. It's not, and that's, I think that one of the big things is, it doesn't really matter which publishing routes you go. I think the biggest thing about today is you still have to be willing to work with other people, because they're helping you. And I think the biggest lie a writer will tell themselves is, we're doing this solitary. It feels it at times, but honestly, it's not.
No, I say in my author's note, when I'm acknowledging people, I say, contrary to popular belief, novel writing is a team game. And yes, I mean, you might be the football analogy, the star striker of the team, but you wouldn't score the goals unless people were feeding you the passes and the balls. So
yeah,
sorry. I've been watching a game of football as well. So
Soccer, football, or American?
soccer, yeah, soccer.
Yeah. Because we got to go both ways here because the NFL season is actually here again. So
Oh, is it? Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
yeah. So who's your team?
Oh, well, I wasn't watching my team actually. My team is a bit sad to admit, but it's Leicester City. So we got relegated last season. So we're playing in the Championship, the league below this season. Which I've sort of accepted, because if you're a Leicester City fan, that is the story of your supporting life. My team is a yo-yo team, up and down, up and down, up and down. But then, of course, 7 years ago they won the Premiership, so, and which is unheard of 5,000 to 1 against, and so they've given me my moments in the sun. I everything else is just fine.
I feel that I'm a hockey guy. I'm a Detroit Red Wings fan. Like I
Ah,
still have the glory of their dynasty way back. It's like,
ah,
yeah, they have
yeah,
sucked for so long now. But at this
yeah.
point, I kind of like, okay, you guys have to get good again. But I had it for so long. It was like I can't really be mad about where they're at right now,
There you
right?
are. You just gotta hope that they'll come good again. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, all right, let's ask let's ask the secret origin story here. So, how did Chris Humphreys decide to get into writing?
well, I kind of always written little bits and pieces. I kept a very detailed journal about my highly exciting, to me anyway, and traumatic sometimes to me as well, life. And so I'd written it in quite a sort of lyrical style. I mean, from the age of 26 to the age of probably my early 40s, I kept a detailed journal. So I was writing in that. I would have ideas and I would start them, but then after a chapter or even a few pages, the ideas would sort of be great in my head, but not so great on the page, because I didn't understand about process. So I abandoned them. I go, oh, obviously I'm not good enough because it's not like my heroes. So abandoned it. And then working as an actor in the theatre, in a lot of theatre, some TV, but a lot of theatre, I thought, I really want to write a historical fiction novel, but that's like a mountain I will probably never climb. But plays I get, right, because I've lived my life. I've made my living doing plays. And so I came up with this idea. Well, something happened to me. It was a very dramatic love affair that happened to me, and I thought I'll write that in the form of a play, and I did, and I entered it in a competition, and it won the competition in Vancouver, best new play. So, and then they put on a production. They gave me $500. So I thought, oh bloody hell, I'm a paid writer now. And so then that happened, and then I then wrote another. I was commissioned to write a second play for a theatre in Calgary, and they commissioned it, workshopped it, loved it, put it on. So I was again earning a bit of money. But as I say, what I was always dreaming of was writing the stuff I'd lived in as a kid, really, and that was historical fiction, adventurous. The more adventurous, the better. Historical, Vikings and Normans and knights and all that stuff. So I had this idea for a novel. It hit me in the gym, actually, in Vancouver. I had this idea about the way I work out. I'm sort of thinking weird things. And I had this idea about the man who killed Anne Boleyn, Anne Boleyn was Henry VIII's second wife, and she was the first one of his 6 wives executed. And I realized that a French swordsman had been brought over to do the job, because it was the kind death. Henry was such a nice guy.
Yes.
And then I realized that I remember that but the rumor was she had 6 fingers on one hand, right, like the mark of the witch, like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, what if it is the mark of the witch, and she is kind of a witch, and she asks the executioner when he takes her head to take her hand as well, because they have to get rid of it, because she will be persecuted after her death as she was in her life. And this is the symbol of the witch. So he agrees to take it, and he's just, this guy, he's a professional, but he agrees to take it and bury it. But she warns him people will be after it, and the Archbishop of Siena, who's this really debauched Italian, Borgia-like prelate, he nicks the hand and leaves my hero to die in a gibbet cage and rides off cackling into the night. Anyway, that's where that began. And I thought about it for years. And I thought, oh, I can't write it. It's a mountain. I'll never climb it. And then 6 years later, I've done all this research. If I ever write that book, it's going to have this in it and this in it. And I read all these books. Finally, I thought, I've got to do it. I sat down, I wrote it quite fast because there was already so much in my head. And then, an agent took me on straight away and had it sold in 3 months to Orion, who were one of the biggest publishers in the UK, with a 2-book deal. So suddenly I had to write a second one. And that was it. That was 2001, I signed that deal, and I've been writing a book every year ever since. Different publishers, but so yeah. So it's one of those things that people said, "Oh, it happened to you really fast." And I go, "No, I've been preparing for years, telling stories to get to the point where I could actually be paid professionally to write and tell mine."
So I have a buddy of mine, and he lives in LA. His name is Russell Nolte. He actually has a thing about success. He goes, it starts out really, really slow, and then it happens fast.
Right.
It's almost like everything you did up to a certain point built up to when you were ready to do it. Does that feel like does that feel right?
Totally. It's, all the, I remember I read an interview with Jack Nicholson once, and he said, get ready, be prepared, because your chance will come. And when your chance comes, that's when you've got to be ready to seize it. So you work, you write, you discard things, you practice. It's a craft, right? I mean, it's a business as well, obviously, but it's a craft. And so, when that right thing happens, and it usually happens for a reason, that the sort of marrying of opportunity and form and the story happens, you need to be ready to take it on. And so when I first had the idea for The French Executioner, I wasn't ready to take it on. Partly fear-based. And that's interesting now, Joshua, because that's what I teach, really. I teach all sorts of workshops, as you know, but craft-based specifics on character or dialogue or violence or whatever. But what I really teach is process and separating out the stages of the process. And so what kept me from writing for years was thinking it had to be good straight away. I don't even think of the words good or bad in my first draft. It's about, what is this story?
So I've started drawing. I don't know if you've seen any of my drawings on they're there on Instagram if you want to check them out, right?
Oh, so cool, I will.
Yeah, it's an evolution, but that whole process thing of what you're saying, the important thing is I had this fear for a very long time that what I was going to do was going to suck. And then one day I had this epiphany. This was the epiphany. So what if it sucks? That's not that actually, even like I'm just going to say this beyond just the craft based things. Art can just be for fun too, right? And you have to, and honestly, to learn to be good, I think you have to learn how to play.
Yeah, and you have to fail.
Yeah.
Samuel Beckett, the famous Irish playwright, Waiting for Godot and all that, said he's had that wonderful phrase in one of his novels: "Fail again, fail better."
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, and so I think that's great. I mean, it's yeah, and who says it sucks anyway? Everyone's got entitled their opinion, but it's by what criteria does it suck? I don't believe in any of that.
Well, no, but okay. What I mean is there's a process. Like when you first start your craft, it's about doing the best you can, right? It's about doing the best you can, and that's all that really matters at the end of the day. But but for me it was I'm going to have fun. And I ended up drawing with some people that worked at some big studios, some big shows. It was great. It was an awesome learning experience. And then one day I realized I have a style. It's like when did that happen? Like it was one of those but all of which to say, like, in terms of there is good, as in it's good as a word is always up for grabs. It's about what you want to get out of it. And that's what I would tell people. It's about what you want to get out of it. If you just want to just draw or write for the sake of writing and drawing, then it really doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. Now, if you want to sell it, like make a living doing it, then you have to work at figuring out how to clarify that vision over a period of time. And it doesn't matter what your art form is.
That's true.
Right. And that's when maybe good has a little more tangibility, maybe a little bit more.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it has to be good for the market you're trying to sell it to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Then they start to judge, and is it good for the market you're trying to sell it to? And and then you have to make it so. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you know, your example there is the truth of the matter is once you decide to do it,
Mhm.
that's when all the stuff will happen to you that you couldn't have foreseen. Sorry, I'm quoting old white writers, but I'm going to quote Goethe here, the German
Okay.
writer,
Hey.
who said, "Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now." You know, and that's true. You can't if you take you're never going to play the game unless you get on the field, right? You've got to actually just start, and then he talks more in that same speech, which is wonderful. I advise anyone to look it up if they can. Um, the about how once you commit yourself to an artistic endeavor, all sorts of stuff will happen that you could not possibly have foreseen. But the key is the commitment.
Yeah, no, you have to go all in. Like, and you got to believe in yourself going all in too. I like when I started freelancing, the first year, my biggest mistake was in the back of my head is, what if I fuck this up? That's not the mindset you need. The right mindset is, I can do this. I
Yeah.
mean, and that is such a big difference.
Huge difference, and I can, you know, I can get better at it as well. You know,
Hmm.
I can get better at it on a craft level. I can understand the business more. I can read more and look at what the world's putting out there. I can, you know, absorb more of where I am and what stage I'm at. And you know, I think it's exciting. It's very exciting.
Absolutely.
Creativity game is exciting.
So I want to talk about your performance. You are a naturally gifted performer. Even here when you're talking about your no, I like honestly,
Thank you.
no, you naturally have a tendency to. You're not afraid to put yourself out there. And honestly, I'm saying this like honestly straight up.
Good.
It's one of the things I admire about you the most.
Ah, well, thank you, thank you. You know, I have, I, I mean, it's in the blood, of
Yeah.
course. I come from a long line of actors. All my grandparents, my dad, you know, three of them were writers as well. Um, I enjoy it for all sorts of reasons, but partly because for me, it's the most present I can be, and I strive to be very present in the world. So, and often fail again, fail better at that. But so when I'm performing or when I'm talking like this and coming up with ideas and finding a different way to express something that I've thought about, I'm very much in the present, and so you know, and of course I'm trained at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, so I have the voice, you know, and I know how to move around a stage or on a screen. So, but yeah, I love. I get very excited about sharing ideas. I get very excited about because I kind of, you know, I know I've figured out stuff, and if I can help people with what I figured out, which if there was one word to sum it up, it would be simplify,
Hmm.
then that's what I can do, and that's why, you know, I get out in front of an audience, be it in a play or a lecture or a workshop, and try to share that that core idea.
And here's my theory about you. I have a theory. I don't know if it's right, but I have a theory about you.
Right?
You secretly want to be a time traveler.
Ah, well, I am a time traveler. I write historical
Yes.
books.
Yeah,
Oh.
but the reason I say it like that is
Mhm.
um when you're talking about history, I just watched how you lit up. I mean, I can just see it, and I just saw how you like. There's still like when you talk about like having boy always history and adventure and stuff like that. That boy is still present in you, and
So,
not only that, right? If tomorrow someone came up to you and said, "Hey, listen, would you like to really go back to this era you imagined?" We would never see you again.
I'd be gone. Oh no, I'd be absolutely gone. I'd be absolutely gone. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, but and I wrote a trilogy for young adults for Knopf called the Runestone Saga, which was all about that. But it's about time travel, but in a very different way. There were no H.G. Wells machines. It was actually using runic magic to travel down a person's own bloodline into the life of an ancestor. And so I wrote a trilogy all about that, and that was very much me, you know, transporting myself down. I'm fascinated by blood and genetic inheritance and all that stuff. So yeah. I mean, that's what I did when I read those books. At 7, 8, 9, 10. Reading those amazing English and US and Canadian. I didn't read in Canadian. I was in London at the time, but historical fictions was because I would just be back there. I could not, could
Do
not
you
get
do
out
you
of it.
remember your first one? The one that actually really, the one that hooked you?
Um, you know, I was reading a lot at that age. But from the age of about 8 on, really. Um, there was one book I remember very clearly. The first book that made me cry,
Hmm.
and it's something that still has an ability to make me cry. It's about sacrifice, really. Someone sacrificing themselves in some way for something greater than themselves. Be it family, be it country. In this case, it was for a king. It was called Hounds of the King, in fact, by Henry Treece, who was an old British historical fiction writer for young adults. I've got a copy of it. I found it in a secondhand store a couple of
Nice.
so I got it back. But it was I remember the end of the book. This, I mean, people know how 1066 came out. It was Harold Godwinson, the Norman invasion and all that. So
Yeah.
it's not really a spoiler. But when Harold was dying on the hill, and this boy who wanted to join his bodyguard, his housecarl, and had been wounded earlier and couldn't. And then he makes his way to the battlefield, and he hears the housecarls sing their death chant because they're going to die with their king. That made me cry. And I thought, oh, the power of it.
It's funny. Just before I talked to you, I had a interesting conversation, but the first time you fall in love, like really, and this ties together in a very, very interesting way. What I realized about sacrifice and for country and king and all that stuff, it means nothing unless you genuinely love those things. Because then
Mm-hmm.
at that point, you are now able. Love blinds you at first, but at some point, like in any relationship, you see the bad in people, in the people you love as well, right? And the temptation, and there's always a temptation to want to control or change or make them better. But if you really love someone or something, you're going to give them the freedom to be themselves. And if you love them that much, right, that you're willing to go on to make sure that they can go on, that means you've accepted them for who they are. And that's why it's such a powerful scene.
So powerful, and you want, and you want to be accepted in the same way. Once you realize that you're also this fragile human being with faults that can really piss people off, particularly love partners. Once you realize that, and you forgive as you hope to be forgiven, right? I mean, my newish partner, I mean, we've been together 2.5 years now, Kat. There are things she does that make me go, oh, come on. But I look at her and I adore her for them, because they are who she is, as
Yeah.
opposed to, I didn't understand it all. 20 years ago, I'd see something and I'd think, oh, that's a fault that's going to break us apart, or, oh, I don't like that about her. I just go, that's part of who she is. And I just hope and I think it's also true that she feels the same way about me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm not the tidiest person in the world. And
That's fair.
I mean, look at my office. For God.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
fair.
that's not toilet paper back there. That's paper towel. But this is my office. I mean, I'm ramshackle, and also as a writer, we are. There's an element of the monster about the writer. They're part human, part some other beast. And once you're and very selfish a lot of the time, because it's all about the words you're trying to get out and tell this story. So but she's very tolerant of that. So at least so far. So that's good.
Well, 2.5 years. I mean, at that point, I mean, she might not know every little nook and cranny about you, but she knows a bit. She knows enough about you. It's like, okay,
And
he needs.
we're both older as well. We've both been through stuff, lots of relationships. We've both got kids with other people and stuff, So we're really happy to have reached this sort of place that it's like, phew, don't have to worry about all that stuff.
Yeah, well, like I said, for me, I realize like what love ultimately is about is acceptance. And
Right.
it's not because again, we're none of us are perfect. I truly think that the only people in this life that have a right to judge you are your kids
Ah, well,
because you brought them in,
mm,
right? So you brought them in. So I think they're the only people in the world that if anyone can judge you, it's them. And,
sure,
yeah.
sure. With the proviso that you've hopefully armed them with the critical skills that you perhaps lacked at their age to be able to
Yeah.
tell the
Well,
difference between someone who is just behaving badly and someone who has reasons for some of the things they do. So hopefully you've instilled in them acceptance as well.
yeah. Acceptance and mercy, because I mean, because your turn is coming, right? So, but I mean,
Wow.
it's one of those. But I say it like that because I think like I said, we have a tendency to look at people different than ourselves, and we are immediately critical. It's only when we get older slash wiser with a question mark that we realize that maybe there's a reason for this. Maybe
Yeah.
there's something I don't understand,
Yes.
and maybe I shouldn't judge at all.
Well, I think yes, but, let he who is without sin cast the first stone, right?
Exactly. I've learned that. Okay, so you got into acting first of everything you've done.
Yeah, yeah. As in the creative worlds, yes, yes. I became an actor fairly late on, considering my family background. I had no interest in it, and then I got cast in the lead in the school play, and then the plans to go to university and read history went out the window, and I went to drama school instead. And so, yeah, I had a. I hate to speak of it in the past tense because I'm still an actor, though I'm not doing that much these days. But I will again, I'm sure, because I love it. But it's yeah, I did very well in my 20s and 30s, and even into my 40s. I did very well. I starred in lots of stuff, a lot of TV stuff, a lot of theatre stuff. It was great. But yeah, but I always think, that when I finally started writing and thought, wow, this is actually what I really want to do, is be a writer. Why didn't I start before? I don't actually cling to that thought very long at all, because I spent years telling other people's stories, both the good, the bad, and the really bad often. But so, and you learn as much from that as you do from playing the really good stuff, which I also got to do. So yeah, it was great training to be a storyteller.
Oh, no, I bet. But so again and again, I have theories. I don't necessarily have facts, but I have theories. I think the biggest I've interviewed actors and stuff on the show, and I realized that they're really good from great performances is when you can actually take a character that has already been written and figured out your part in the character, the part that you can connect to. Because those are the best performances. Like folks, I'm gonna spoil this a little bit. You have to watch him do Hamlet. You legitimately have to watch him do Hamlet. I don't necessarily want you don't need to necessarily I'm not expecting you to perform anything today, but I will say this. His take on to be and to not to be is utterly his. It's
Oh, well,
great. It's
thank you,
great.
thank you. I played it many years ago, and I'm far too old to play it now. But I do have a sense of him still, for sure. I mean, he's one of five roles that I feel I did inhabit. But he's a good example of what you just said. It's finding where Hamlet sat within me.
Yeah.
And when I started out as an actor, I thought it was all about disguise and becoming someone else. But then, fairly soon on, 5, 6 years into the game, I realized that that's not what it's about at all. That when you walk out on the stage, they're not looking at this other person, they're looking at you. You are the person on the stage. You are the person in front of that camera. So where does Hamlet, for example, live in you? What is it that you can relate to?
Hmm.
Um, and it's true of any role, really, be it the monsters or saints or whoever, or just ordinary people. Where does that person's journey, and their different set of circumstances to yours? I mean, that's where you do your background research and everything. Where they're from, obviously how they speak, how they, and then you can play with the physicalities of them, of course. But yeah, you look at a person and you think, I can relate to that. You look at Hamlet and think, I mean, when I played Hamlet and the guy walked on as the ghost of my father, he had my father's eyes, my father's blue eyes. My father had died, only a few years before. So, it was very easy is not the right word, but it was accessible to find where he sat in me, and it's true of every part actually,
And
but
that's
not
the
always
hard.
well written as Hamlet.
No. But I don't. An actor, and I say this, I've worked on film sets with I've done behind the crew stuff with an actor can take a bad script and make it good to a point at least, right? So
So many times you think I've saved this writer's butt by
yes,
giving this something, because it's like you look and you go, it's absolutely nothing here to play. It's funny because I said that once to someone about they asked about my writing and novels and screenwriting. What are the things you do? And I said, well, one of the things I do, I create characters and I give them something to play.
hmm
It's like they have something to go after. There's something they really want and need, which is one of the things that drives all fiction. What do they want? What do they need? Not necessarily the same thing, but yeah. So it's great. It's great. I love both things, and they feed each other very much. The acting and the writing. Yeah.
yeah. Well, what I was gonna say is acting taught you how to find that part, and also probably taught you how to be vulnerable. So
Uh,
so because you'd have to like, it's one thing to know where he'd be accessible. That's where the part where it's not so easy, right? Is okay. This is a really vulnerable place for me. Like when you talked about the ghost, I saw it. You choked up even just a little bit
yeah.
because it came from a very personal place,
Totally. Totally.
right?
Totally. Yeah. It's yeah. I mean that sort of thing is accessible because once you've had that sort of emotion around something, I think
Yeah,
it's not hard to suddenly pull it back.
yeah. But I can just tell you let yourself be vulnerable on the stage at least enough that people could see both the pain, but also the character. It was made really even easier to connect. Again, art, I think any form of art is about learning to express yourself, your story that you are telling right now about your life, regardless of what trappings you have, right?
Yeah.
And being open and confident and vulnerable enough to express that. I don't know, I didn't know you in your 20s, but I'm willing to bet that in your 20s at least part of the reason you didn't want to go into acting is you wanted to figure out who you were. And then ironically going onto the stage, you found who you were.
Well,
Right?
I think that's interesting. I mean, I've always wanted to figure out who I am. So, but and and Hamlet taught me an awful lot about that. But also, I'm very interested in what thought is anyway. I'm not sure thinking about Hamlet says, "For there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." And
It's true.
I based my second play on that one. But I think thinking about something and you can make yourself feel, and I'll think about it and I feel great. I think about it, I feel terrible, and so thought itself can be almost misleading. So what is the self behind the thought? And Hamlet actually taught me a lot about that.
Yeah.
At least opened up a big door for me, which I've been wandering down that corridor for a while now.
So you're fascinated with consciousness. Where does this all come
Very.
from? Where does this all come from?
Yeah, who's the self? I'm very interested in. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's been like that's somewhat the rune, like the rune trilogy deals with that as well. Like who is the self?
Completely,
Yeah.
completely. And what influence has experience had upon our sense of self?
Absolutely. I think well, it's interesting, right? Because all of us see like me and you are not that different, but we've experienced things different, like some of the same things, but some very different things.
Yeah, well, we're both creators, so there's that similarity for a start. Yeah,
Yeah, but I mean, I think even general, like the general want, not necessarily specifics, but the general stuff. You want to be happy. You want to do what you love with people you love. I don't think anybody's that different, really, when it comes to that,
right. Mostly
right?
that's true.
Right? The specifics are different, but the generalities aren't that different,
No,
right? So, but what's fascinating is we can all have that specific like those specific differences completely change how we view life,
mm,
right? Completely.
yeah.
And it's a matter of perception. But then it goes down a deep dark rabbit hole here. Well, is my perception real?
Well, reality, what a concept, as Robin Williams said.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's so interesting. Yeah, no, I mean it's true. It's true. I mean, I think that for me the prime the prime requisite is curiosity.
Hmm.
Curiosity about how why you react in a certain way to a certain thing. Where might that come from? This reactive you. Curiosity about other people. That's what fuels you both as an actor and a writer to try to find out, what's their motivation. I mean, it's the old cliche, but it's true. Why would they react in that way? I've written about some pretty dark characters in my career, like my most successful novel was Vlad: The Last Confession, about the real Dracula, Vlad the Impaler. I talked about writing it longhand. Um, that was a very dark road to go down, but fascinating to try to uncover his motivation, beyond the monster. And in the end, you talked about judgment before, giving up the need to judge him, letting the reader judge him. I told his story.
Yeah. And that's like, because honestly, like, I think the more interesting thing about monsters is we all have monsters in us,
Yeah.
and sometimes they're necessary, like because you like there's times, and you notice in this business, sometimes you have to be a little ruthless, sometimes you have to fight for yourself. That
Mhm.
monster's not a bad thing there. Then
Mm.
again, but sometimes, I mean, and we know this, that monster also can cause us complications, for lack of a better term, right? And
We don't all behave well all the time, let's face it.
well, no, none of us do. That's I mean, we wouldn't be human beings if we were perfect.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
but the parts of us ironically, that monster within us, some of our best parts come from it,
sure.
right? Right? So that's
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you got to use the dark stuff as well, and if only to spend more time in the light, right? It
yeah,
needs
well,
to
no, absolutely.
come from.
Absolutely. So
Yeah, yeah,
Vlad
yeah.
the Impaler. So why Vlad? Like, why? What was your curiosity with him?
Oh, well, it began, like one of these strange origin stories of writing. It began with my editor wanting me to write what he thought was a bestseller. So I stopped making people up. Humphreys, French executioner, was basically made up. Jack Absolute, basically made up. And let's find a marquee name for you to write about, because you're definitely a good enough writer to be able to just take a marquee name and we can sell it on the marquee, right? But we were rooting around for names, and who hadn't been done to death. Alexander the Great, done. William the Conqueror, done. Cleopatra, done. Henry V, done. All these people. And he was the one who suggested to me over a slightly drunken lunch in London. No, actually, more than slightly drunken. It's well into the second bottle of claret. He said, Dracula. And I went, oh, come on, must have been done. And it hadn't been done as historical fiction at that point. It's been done a few times since. And that fascinated me. And I quite rapidly found out why, because it was a very, very dark tale. And, everything you read was kind of written by the people who needed him to look really bad. I mean, he was a victim of a huge propaganda campaign. Not that he wasn't, up to stuff, but
Sure.
in the times he lived, he was kind of just one of the guys doing terrible things for God, to kill the infidel. And to kill the enemies of God as he perceived him. So he was a crusader and a warrior and a patriot and fervently religious and all that stuff. But he chose to express that in ways that played into his psychology. And then I found out more about his psychology. The child that was ripped away from his parents at 9 years old and sent as a hostage to the Turk, where he was pampered and raised and taught in the best school in the world. And then his father betrayed the Turk and he was thrown into the worst prison in Turkey for 2 years. I mean, it's, by 17, that's got to screw you up a bit, right? So I took those stories. I took every sort of tale of Vlad and span it in a different way. So it was a fascinating write. I mean, people love that book still. It's funny, when words collide, I had this one agent say to me, so he said, "You're the Vlad man." I went, "Yeah, I suppose I am the Vlad man."
I'd be very curious to know which one of them said that
Yeah.
actually off the air,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. It was from the Rights Factory. What was her name? Jessica? No, I don't know. Anyway,
Jennifer.
Jennifer, thank you.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I'm actually, she might be coming on the show too before I wrap up the Twitch
Oh,
era. So
oh, good, good, good.
she was fun. She was a lot of fun to meet.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I liked it a lot. Yeah, yeah. No, they were all great. It was a great event, wasn't it? I mean, the whole thing was
Yeah,
great.
for me. It was great because I see like I've chosen to take this very seriously and try to make this a living.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm not quite where I want to be yet, I've come a long way. And
You mean
it's
the interviewing and the show and stuff?
well, not just the interviewing. I mean, I've written 6 books. I
Oh,
have
right,
comics.
right,
I've published comics. I've been
right.
published as an illustrator. I've done video shows for people. Like I've been
Yeah, you're in the creative world. You're making a living in the creative world. It's not an easy thing to do.
no, but most months and now I break. I mean, I've crossed living wage line a couple times. I'm not quite there all the way, but it's like
Well, it's hard. It's hard these days, particularly. The publishers aren't paying like they used to. So, even though, my new book, Someday I'll Find You, is selling really well and I should make some more money out of it, but it's only Canada at the moment. My agent's been trying to sell it in the UK, but I'm fed up. All these publishers are going, well, it's not, they don't even read the book. It's me, old white dude, not bitter, by the way, but just that. That's the state of the world right now, and I get some of it, but also, my last books were published so appallingly in the UK that I didn't have good sales, and therefore money men look at that and go, "Who is this guy? Oh yeah, well he didn't sell well, so why would we buy him?" And so nothing to do with the book at all, which people are loving. So, anyway, I'm going to publish it myself.
well, yeah, no, because I think we all have to. Like, so for me, I did an Alice in Wonderland Greek mythology mashup.
Oh, nice.
I made Alice Pandora because I
Oh,
realized Alice and Pandora are essentially the same story.
interesting.
Right. So I made Wonderland a mashup between what you recognize from Wonderland, but I matched up with Greek mythology.
Oh,
One of my
cool.
so I did that one myself.
Hmm.
Right. That's the one that got nominated for an award, not
Hmm.
the ones I've done for publishers.
Hmm.
And again, it made me realize like at this particular point, I think if you're a creative, the real challenge today is going, okay, who is likely to be the audience for this book and who best can reach them?
Hmm.
Sometimes the answer is you.
That's funny. You see, I don't think about the audience at all.
Yeah.
No, not well. That's not quite true. That's disingenuous. But I do. I really, when I'm writing a book, I just have to tell the story. I have to find out what the story is. Afterwards, second draft. Sometimes I'll start to think more, perhaps, about an audience. But really, whatever this story is, I must strive to tell it as well as possible, and then hopefully it'll find an audience.
Slight clarification. Slight clarification. In the process of creating, I'm completely with you. I'm talking like when you've made the story, right? When you've made the story, because today there's not a straight answer anymore, right?
Gosh, no. Absolutely not.
Right. Traditional publishing has decentralized a little bit. There's Kickstarter, which is a huge, is a huge market. I don't think people, again, from an author standpoint, it's still relatively untapped. Right. There's also going just a traditional more indie deal, the middle-sized publishers, because they do some really cool stuff too. But there's not necessarily a right answer anymore. It's about, again, when the book is done, when the story is told, right? What book, where I think this book fits? Like I'm talking once the story is created, right? Not in the.
Oh, absolutely. You got to put on a different hat. If you want to sell copies, you've got to put on the marketing hat and do that. And I'm about to move to that world for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Again, it comes back to what I was saying before about process. Each stage of the process has a different imperative, right? And so the creative side of the process is you don't think about an audience really. You're thinking about communicating with the single person who's going to read this book, the reader. It's a thing that happens. A book is a thing that happens, created by two people. Well, we know there are others, but two people essentially, the writer and the reader, right? And they make it between them. And so that reader, I don't personify them. I just think, I'm going to tell you this story. I wonder if you'll like it.
Yeah.
and then see what happens then.
And that's the best. And honestly, in the creative process, I think that's purely the best way to do it. Because otherwise, how can you be honest?
Well, I think people want truth in the end. They want
Yeah.
your truth, whatever it is, and that's the way we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I honestly gotta say, we're near the end of the hour here, good sir.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Um,
Well, I need to go and write the rest of my book.
no, you do. But before we wrap up, I just want to say, so folks, this has been a long time coming. This interview, I've wanted to have him on the show even before the pandemic. So I'm glad it finally actually happened.
And when you told me I had dropped the ball somehow, I was mortified.
It wasn't. But again, looking
But no,
back,
it's great. It's great that we were able to do it now, Joshua. And yeah, I mean, great. I mean, I assume you'll put up all the stuff about how to track me down and get hold of me and all that stuff.
well, yeah. But what I want you to do before we wrap up, though, is you should plug your current book. I mean, you probably should, right?
I should. Right. I'm just going to disappear through this door for 1 second because it's
no worries. I'm just gonna awkwardly dance.
You can look. Okay, you do that, and people can look at the toilet paper.
That's right. That's right. So yes, Chris Humphreys is a one of a kind. Like I said, he is an actor. He is a writer. He is an amazing human being. I built you up. I built you up. So tell people.
Someday I'll find you. The new one, World War II epic love romance spy saga about a Canadian fighter pilot and a Norwegian spy. They meet in London during the Blitz and they part. They fall in love, but they have to part, and they're going off to die probably, but someday they'll hope to find each other again. It's partly based on my own parents because my dad was a fighter pilot and my mum was a spy.
Really? Same army, I'm assuming, right?
My mother was a Norwegian spy for SOE and worked in the resistance in Norway during the German occupation. My father fought the Germans in the Battle of Britain and then in North Africa and was shot down. So this book is not their story. It's a fiction. It's a love story.
Oh, no, absolutely.
But there's an ethos to it. I mean, it was an amazing write on all sorts of levels. Talk about the personal, So I got to know my parents again, and I got to almost ask them the questions I didn't while they were alive. So it's been fantastic, and it's been doing well, which is lovely. I mean, people seem to be reacting and relating to it. So honestly,
it sounds fantastic.
Like it's legit. It's an adventure. It's an adventure as well.
But not only that, honestly, you should mention that little part at the beginning because that's really the fact that it is a personal story to you in a good in a great way. And maybe again, yes, it's a cool adventure story, but it's also in an odd way, it's about you reconnecting to your family.
It's totally yeah. It's a very personal book, and I needed to wait till my 22nd book to write it. Basically, I think I was warming up.
No, but dude, I kind of want to buy it now. Dang, so I gotta go hunt it down. But if people want
everywhere, it's still everywhere. It's still selling well. So pop into your local bookstores and get it now.
Yes. And one last thing, how can people find you?
AuthorChrisHumphreys.com is my website. c.c.humphreys on Instagram. Facebook, obviously, Twitter, again, Humphreys CC, but sorry, not Twitter, X. But Instagram.
Twitter hurts my brain right now.
I know. I'm kind of slipping away from it. Instagram and my website are the best ways, really.
Yeah. I mean, another conversation for another day. I am only on Twitter for one reason now, just one. It's still the best place from a journalistic point of view, and I interview people. But it hurts the brain. I don't know what to expect there anymore. Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, this is Chris Humphreys. Check out, you should put the book up one more time.
Oh, the book?
Yeah, put it up. That is his latest release. You should check it out right now. And folks, I'm going to be back a little bit later today. Episode 999 is actually tonight. And then Wednesday, I know, you're 998. 999. Yeah. So 999 is my very first guest I've ever had on this show. He's actually coming back. And then 1000 is legendary comic creator Keith Giffen.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
How cool. Thank you. Bravo. Congratulations to you for doing all that. Thank you for the interview. It's been a fascinating talk, and I please people write to me on Instagram or my website and let me know what you think.
And that's how we're going to wrap up the show, ladies and gentlemen. Stay inspired, keep shining in the dark, and I'll see you guys next time. Oh, sorry. I got the wrong button there.